Date, Standardized Human Time, September 3, 2136. Nursing the human back to health became my obsession. The doctors were optimistic that Marcel would make a full recovery, but I was determined not to vacate his side. There was no way I was leaving his well-being to chance, ever again. My claws tightened around the fork, stabbing into a block of tofu. The spongy protein folded into the prongs, and I brought it up toward the human's mouth. My gaze lingered on the pointy canines beside his incisors, which looked perfect for tearing flesh. It felt unnatural, placing my paw so near to a predator's teeth while offering it food. A pins and needles sensation danced at the base of my toes, which I promptly ignored. "Slanek, I can do this myself," Marcel protested. The predator was lounging in a hospital bed, propped up against some pillows. After a fresh shave and some washing up, my human looked more like his old self. A nose splint concealed the deformed appendage, and stitches mended the gashes on his cheek. Fluids and medication were distributed intravenously, which brought life back into his complexion. I glared at him. "But I'm not going to let you." "And that's that." Marcel rolled his eyes, but allowed me to insert the protein between his lips. I scrutinized him as he chewed. It was wonderful to see him eating real food after his long hunger, but I didn't want to lose sight of the big picture. Human medicine was primitive compared to ours, a school of medievalism. My vigilance was the only hope at preventing complications. All I knew was that Marcel's diet was essential to his recovery. It was my intention for him to consume every calorie the medical staff gave us. I prepared a forkful of greens, which looked scrumptious and herby, and shoved it at him. The red-haired primate sighed. He tugged the plate from my stubborn paws and set it on the bedside table. "You gotta stop babying me." "I'm fine, buddy, really." The human began to sit up and grimaced as pain scorched across his ribs. "See? Good as new." Tears welled in my eyes. "No, you're not. I'm on the mend. This is the new normal, and that's okay. I'm tougher than you think I am. You're very strong, and resilient, and brave, but—" "What?" "I almost lost you, Mark. And it scares me how much that hurts." "Ah. It's over now, Slanek. I'm never going to let anyone hurt us again, okay? Come here." I curled up on the bed and placed my chin on the predator's thigh. Marcel reached out with his nimble fingers. The same hesitancy that always flashed on his face when he was worried about spooking me surfaced. His hand hovered over the back of my neck for several seconds, and my heart rate skyrocketed. What was he doing? My instincts despised the location of his paw and the way his nails were aimed at my head. It was a slash away from my throat. Everything about that body language mirrored a predator about to pounce. No amount of trust could alter those ominous cues. My eyes blinked shut, and I summoned all of my willpower to remain still. I felt a light touch on my ear. The human palmed the right one gently, then moved to the other. The breath I didn't realize I had been holding in escape. Marcel beamed when he saw me relax, and took that as encouragement to continue. His fingers darted beneath my chin and ruffled the fur by my throat. The human's claws nicked my skin. They were rather dull for a predator's offensive weapons. Oddly enough, it was more gratifying than painful. A happy mewl emanated from my chest. I nuzzled against his side and flipped onto my back. "You're so cute," he whispered. Without thinking, I had exposed the most soft and vulnerable organ, my stomach. Marcel tickled my belly with vigor, which was quite the overwhelming sensation. I was embarrassed by my undignified squeals and laughs, but my control was slipping. I rolled around in delirium, thrashing and kicking. The human had to catch me when I almost tumbled off the bed. He winced from the abdominal strain, but refused to drop me. Affection and warmth shined in his eyes. "Am I interrupting something?" Sarah stood in the doorway, amusement on her face. She stared at me, the blankets on the floor, then back at me. Actually, you were, but not what you think, Marcel chuckled. What can I do for you? You look better. We're all happy to see it, she replied. But I just wanted a quick word with Slanek. Alone. I tilted my head at the scientist, confused. Had the humans decided to blame me for my inability to prevent Marcel's injuries? Did they think he would be better off with someone stronger and more competent at their civic duties? I couldn't fault them if that were the case. My human released his grip and gave me an encouraging wave. A paralyzing reluctance made me slow to follow Sarah, so I dragged my feet to a secluded spot in the hallway. A mature individual would accept the consequences of their own failure, especially when that failure landed their best friend in critical condition, a whisker away from death. I can't let him go, though. I slumped my shoulders. Look, Sarah, I am so sorry for what happened to Mark. My best friend was terrorized by a madman, and I was nothing more than a liability. I take full responsibility for everything, and accept whatever the UN has decided. If there is anything that I can do to make it right. Slow down. The scientist raised a pale hand. Nobody blames you, least of all Marcel. I think having you around is helping him immensely. You do? It's obvious. He's trying to hide it, but I figure he's in a lot of pain. That's what I was worried about. So then, what is it you needed to speak to me about? Oh stars, is there bad news about Mark? Perhaps. It's not clear yet. If I remember correctly, he was frightened of torture by aliens before this, yeah? Sarah waited for my nod. She seemed concerned about how to phrase her next words. I think you need to be warned about how humans react to trauma. Our brains often have difficulty processing it. I studied her expression closely. What are you trying to say? Is Marcel going to go insane? That's not a polite word, Slanek. Everyone reacts differently. Marcel could be fine, and I hope he is, she said. But after what he's been through, you must be prepared for drastic changes in mood and personality. He could become depressed, forgetful, irritable, or even hostile. Hostile? Nightmares and flashbacks are common in these cases. That can incite all sorts of negative reactions. My eyes widened in surprise. It had never occurred to me that humans relive their worst experiences as vividly as we did. When I imagined how their brains worked, I always assumed it was different. No wonder Marcel was in a prolonged fog after watching the Arxer torture clips on the first day. Why would a predator have such an overblown fear response and cling to memories of prior threats? They were on the other side of that equation in nature. Even if humans descended from prey animals, they hadn't been that for millions of years. I guess it proves humans are just people, like us. That their emotions resemble ours. You didn't say negative. You said hostile, I pointed out. Sarah shuffled on her feet. Well, the memories trigger our fight-or-flight response. Some people lash out with physical violence, though they don't mean to. I think that unlikely here, but it needs to be stated as a possibility. My breath hitched in my throat, though I tried not to show my fright to the scientist. Physical violence? Being assaulted by a predator wasn't exactly on my bucket list. If a human lunged at me, without warning, I doubted I could keep my composure. It would be tough to brush that off. The thought of Marcel, with his meaty hands clenched around my windpipe, stirred all of my subconscious fears. But I knew that wasn't him. My human hadn't tried to eat me, even when he was starving. This mindless killer preserved my welfare, to his own detriment, and never displayed anything but kindness toward me. As long as it was unintentional, I decided I could forgive him for spontaneous violence. Sarah deemed it improbable, so in all likelihood, it wouldn't happen. The prospect of mental torture that would drive Marcel to violate his principles was more concerning to me. Why are you telling me this? I questioned. Maybe Sarah thinks I wasn't being supportive enough. Or she'll teach me which signs to watch for. Human mannerisms are as alien gets. I don't want you to fault Marcel, or to think it's proof that humans are evil. I know how frightened you Venlil are of us. If any of those symptoms would be too much to deal with, it may be best that we find you a more suitable partner. My ears flattened against my head. Is that what the Terran scientific community believed we thought of them? That we saw them as interchangeable demons, and volunteered just to vindicate that conclusion? That's right. We risked our lives, waiting for them to slip up, so we could say, gotcha. I thought sarcastically. There was nobody in the galaxy, human, Venlil, or otherwise, more suitable than Marcel. Being around him was pleasant and easy. I wasn't going to discard him the second a challenge presented itself. You want me to leave him, because he might be ill? I hissed. I don't want another partner. I want Marcel, and I'll deal with whatever happens. No, we don't want you to leave. That's the opposite of what we want. Sarah took a step back, trying to appear non-threatening. But your feelings and well-being are important too, Slanek. You must not discount yourself, out of some sense of guilt or obligation. Obligation? I love him. Did you consider Marcel's feelings at all? To even suggest that I should abandon him, right when he needs me the most, it's cruel. Heartless. We are thinking of Marcel. Listen, he is in a fragile state right now. You are the main thing, Remin, reminding him he is human. That someone cares for him. What would hurt him the most is to hear you call him a monster. A furious growl rumbled in my throat. I would never. Short of him eating my family in front of me, anyway. I hate that anyone would suggest otherwise. Then I'll leave you be. Sarah's voice was measured, but there was pleasure in her eyes at my response. If you need anything, you know where to find me. I flicked my ears in acknowledgement, and scampered back toward my human's chamber without hesitation. After the mention of being pried away from Marcel, all I wanted was to have him back in my sight. What if he had an episode while I was gone? Once he was in my periphery, I could rest assured that he was okay. Marcel had cleaned his plate during my absence, and was seated on the edge of the bed. His predatory eyes were staring into space, unblinking. There was the hint of a twitch by his lip, as if he were biting his cheek. The human jumped a little when I leapt onto the mattress. I coiled my tail around his wrist, and noted how he slowly unclenched his fist. Slanek, he sighed. I missed you. Before, I had attributed his aloof moments to the primitive narcotics in the IVs. But in light of Sarah's words, it was apparent that a different culprit was to blame. I felt ashamed of myself for not picking up on the cues sooner. My preoccupation with his physical injuries caused me to overlook the obvious. What were you thinking about? Just now? I blurted. The human forced a smile. You don't want to know. I do. You can tell me anything, Mark. Not this. Try me. His gaze darkened. I'm thinking I want to kill Sovlin. Get in line. I'm quite serious. I was fantasizing about it. Does that make me a bad person? A bloodthirsty predator? I'd shed no tears over his death. It's not fair that he got away scot-free. You're a good person who is trying to process something terrible, and yes, has more aggressive instincts. You didn't deserve any of what he did to you. Thanks, buddy. You don't have to thank me. I should have asked about your mental health sooner. How do those memories make you feel? Are you able to talk about it? I don't know. When Sovlin was about to shoot me, I felt relief that it was over. Profound relief. I was ready for him to pull the trigger. I was only sorry that you had to see it. And that Zarn was kidnapping you because of me. Don't worry about me. All that matters to me is that you're here and you recover. That's why I need you to let me push myself, Slanek. I heard we're going to war with the Gojids, and I want to join. Even if it's just to fly a ship or run logistics, I need to be cleared for action. But you're safer here. Why would you want to risk your life again, so soon? To go after Savlin, to deal with my anger, all of it. I have to do something, and I didn't know how to tell you. It's being idle that drives me mad. Fine. When are we leaving? The human blinked. We? I'm coming with you, if I have to stow away in your duffel bag. You can't get rid of me that easily. Moisture glistened in Marcel's hazel eyes, and a low chuckle rumbled from his vocal cords. A silent vow formed in my mind that I would protect him better this time around. Even if it meant shipping off to an active war zone, surrounded by trained predators with guns. Something told me that I wouldn't be the only Venlil tagging along for the humans' war efforts. Though there was no formal declaration from the governor yet, I think we had chosen a side. The fates of our species were intertwined, for better or for worse. It was a maintenance worker, sweeping the ship for any stragglers, who found the doctor and I caged in the beast's filthy pen. The reek of waste and blood had been overpowering in the cell, a sickening reminder that the predator had walked those very floors. It felt beneath my dignity to lie in such squalor, with no company but the sulking Zarn. I could still see Marcel's hideous face when I closed my eyes. My heart seized at the thought of those sunken eyes, soulless and scorching. The sound of the human's voice grating at my ears, as he tried to offer some deceitful words, was unforgettable too. When I saw my first officer chumming it up with that savage, it was no wonder I saw red. What a nightmarish creature it was, I thought. How could anyone ever care for it? Riesel's betrayal stung more than the burning in my leg ever could. I had taken the Kolshan under my wing for decades, and mentored him into a confident officer that commanded respect. How could he shoot me, for that animal? After what the Federation had endured, wasn't I entitled to a few minutes of retribution? The human suffering paled in comparison to the children mauled as arcs or toys, or the worlds raised in radiation and fire. The first officer's most offensive statement was comparing me to the Arxer. Since when was protecting my crew from an existential threat a crime? Everyone would be happier with one less human prowling the universe, other than the Venlil, I suppose. They needed to be rescued before the predators sank their claws any deeper. Savlin, Zarn growled. The Prime Minister is on the line. Are you well enough to speak to her? It was arduous to round up the crew from various shuttles, but we managed to put the band back together. Placing a medical official, with no combat expertise, as acting first officer wasn't my first choice, but I needed someone who would support me on matters of human policy. Keeping the crew on a leash was my primary objective. I raised my hobbled leg, studying the azure-stained bandage. Of course I am. Riesel blew off a limb, not my head. Put her on screen. The video call flickered to life, revealing a glaring pyre. Savlin. Tell me how you managed to lose a predator, in the mere days since your last check-in. The Federation is going to freak out. Word of Tarva's folly traveled across the Federation within days, after we detained our unwelcome guest. Panic was spreading through civilian channels, and public pressure was mounting for an immediate response. Galactic leaders arranged an emergency convention to discuss joint action, but it would take days for everyone to arrive at the designated meeting spot. More time would be squandered coordinating the forces of hundreds of independent powers. The Gogiti Union was not content to sit on its paws, while vacillating fools debated the obvious choice. Destructive measures were necessary at once, before the humans lashed out at the Venlil. We were en route to a Gojid border station to rendezvous with our bombing partners. Launching for Earth felt like my destiny. I was ecstatic to join the mission, and hoped we could cripple the human breeding grounds. The escapees wouldn't have time to warn humanity, so our attack would come as an unexpected blow. Now that humans were spacefaring, it was unlikely to eliminate them entirely. But with any luck, their numbers would be reduced to insignificance, and the remnants would wipe each other out with their aggression. The damn predators were a smear on the name of sentience. Must your head always be elsewhere? I demand an answer, Captain. Pyrie hissed. How did the Predator escape? I don't know how to say this, but First Officer Riesel shot me and released it, I answered. The Prime Minister recoiled in shock. Riesel? Why, he's served under you for decades. He's practically Gojid at this point. What pushed him to such reckless action? The humans seem to have an ability to charm others that we didn't account for. They appear to be able to manipulate empathy, and to pretend to be like the rest of us. My first officer said I was being unfair to the flesh-eater, if you believe that. Well then, I'll put out a warrant for Riesel's arrest. I'm sure the Kolshians will side with us. There's no excuse for a veteran, who just watched our briefing videos, releasing a human. She tapped a few buttons on her console, most likely penning a transmission to the Federation. At least we've gathered some key information from this debacle. The humans are more intelligent than the Greys, and more cooperative. With respect, ma'am, what makes you say that? The Arxer would have never made it to space without our interference. But these monkeys did it without outside assistance. I suppose you're right. That only makes their schemes and ruses more complex. They seem quite capable of mirroring empathetic responses. Indeed. Let's not forget, Sovlin, the Venlil are one of the weakest and most emotional races in the galaxy. And that's by our standards. The humans will enjoy turning on them. My thoughts exactly. Whatever Tarva or Riesel say, the only good human is a dead human. And I'm going to see to it that there's a lot of those by next week. I commend your courage. Oh, and Captain, be warned that we've lost contact with 2 military outposts that were slated to join the bombing run. Our scouts are going to look in, but I'd stay alert. I flared my nostrils in dismay. The humans would have had to know about our scheme days ago to launch any countermeasures, and that was inexplicable. Clairvoyance wasn't a Predator trait, to my knowledge. Tarva wouldn't be idiotic enough to tell humanity about the Federation's earlier plans, would she? That would be begging for retribution. Venlil involvement in the plot was extensive, according to my files. Due to Earth's proximity to their borders, they prodded the Federation to act quicker. The decades our leaders spent dawdling was time for the Predators to advance. Perhaps the humans had kidnapped some Venlil quietly and were torturing them, out of Tarva's eye. There were a myriad of ways they could have obtained the information. I'll report if I hear anything. It could be the Arxer, though it's impeccable timing if so, I said. Pyrie flicked her ears. Perhaps. Is it bad that I almost hope it's the Greys? Ugh, take care of yourself, Sovlin. The call blinked out, and I turned my attention to the viewport. The blue dot on screen was an unnamed Gojid colony, with a population around 20,000. Its border location lacked appeal for potential settlers, due to the inherent peril. Its only drawing point was dirt-cheap housing. The humans will push everyone closer to home soon enough. Our resources are already strained with a single enemy, I pondered. Our military launch point was lodged on a large asteroid, just beyond the colony's orbit. It functioned as a hub for bomber squadrons and defensive units. I spotted a few Gojid patrol ships, adrift in the system's outer reaches. Spacecraft were ready to fight at all hours of the day, in case of any Arxer incursions. Everything appeared to be normal, but Pyrie's warning lingered in my mind. Predators loved stealth and ambush tactics. If our attackers were the humans, that was more proof they were the same as the Greys. It was their nature to catch others off guard and helpless. Halt out of docking range. I shouted. Scan the perimeter for ship activity. Better safe than sorry. It could do no harm to supplement our station's intel from a different vantage point. Sensors didn't reveal any subspace disruptions or gravitational disturbances, at first glance. However, there were a few stray radio signals by the system's gas giants that seemed peculiar. That caught my attention, and I decided it merited further investigation. What are those coordinates you've input? Why are we turning the viewport? Zarn asked. I tapped my claws nervously. Nothing, I hope. We'll see soon enough. Zooming in on the source of the EMF anomaly, a formation of angular ships became visible. Gasps sounded across the bridge. My spines raised in an instant, and I gaped at the startling image. How could an enemy have gotten within the system unseen? Lurking near celestial bodies with high masses to evade detection was possible, in theory. But there wasn't a more dangerous place to disengage warp. While a strong gravitational field masked an incoming subspace trail, it would leave the ships at risk of being drawn into orbit. It would require incredible patience as well. To avoid discovery, those vessels needed to engage in a series of tiny jumps. That was the only way to ensure that their trail didn't poke into real space at an unwanted moment. Did those ships really hop between high-gravity spots and wait for their drive to respool each time? Not utilizing continuous warp transit would increase travel time tenfold. That's no Arxer strategy, I thought. These humans learn quickly, and it seems they gamble with their lives. Knowing the Terran position, the computer was able to tease out sensor readings. A rough estimation of their capabilities would help us concoct a plan of attack. What is their shield capacity? I barked. Zarn's eyes stretched wide in panic. I don't know. How do I read this shit? I miss Resell immensely. Let me see. With a sigh of irritation, I pulled up the data feed on my workstation. Why the primitive, not a trace of ion generators? I don't think they've figured out how to power shields. Sounds like great news. What are your orders, sir? The doctor asked. My disappointment with Zarn was already mounting. A lackey wasn't what I desired, deep down. I wanted a first officer with their own ideas, who was willing to challenge me when their thoughts were contrary. The thought of Resell wasting in a cell, or being toasted over a fire by the humans, felt like such a damn waste. A fine man, who threw away his career over some misplaced idealism. Charged the railgun, but slow and subtle. We don't want to alarm the humans. A sharp pain stabbed through my leg, the first sign of the painkillers waning. In the meantime, let's amplify and intercept those radio signals. I think two of the ships are talking to each other. While Zarn stood around like a lost child, the comm station pounced on my order. Static fed through the PA, an incoherent buzzing. The technicians took a few moments to fine-tune the settings, and my ears perked up in anticipation. Catching the predators red-handed, gloating over the prospect of eating and torturing sentience, would squash any doubts. It should even be enough to win back the Venmal. I wonder if Tarva knows about the cheap tactics her friends employ, I mused. What does she see in these skin-eaters? She'll be begging us to take the Venmal back by tomorrow. Too harsh on them. A thunderous voice echoed over the loudspeakers, sinking into its captive audience. It was so quiet on the bridge that you could hear a pin drop. The Arxer traumatized the Xenos, and we're just making it worse. They'll think we're just like them, Sonny. This'll be their proof. They're going to attack Earth if we don't, came the tired reply. It's a military base, nothing more. It's fair game. Meyer didn't put any civilian targets on the list. But the Gojids haven't done anything yet. There's still time for them to change their mind. We should have tried to negotiate. Raj, are you mad? They would drop bombs on London, Mumbai, or Lagos without thinking for a second. They don't want to talk to us. I know. I just signed on to fight the Arxer, and now, it's not like I imagined. This is not the time for second thoughts. We'll offer medical assistance to any survivors. I'm certain the UN and the Venmal will try to broker peace, but right now, this is about surviving. This is about humanity. I blinked in confusion. Much of my crew looked dazed, as though they were having trouble processing the conversation. From the two humans' words, you would think it was the Gojids who were the villains in this scenario, not the stealth ships creeping in on a clueless station. Why were those Predator pilots talking like they felt sorry for us? Why did both of them sound like they wanted peace, as though it were their own objective? Soft old fool, I cursed myself. How did you almost fall for such a basic trap? It must be some sort of trickery, an empathetic ploy, in case anyone was listening in. If we hesitated to shoot the human craft, that lent them a strategic advantage. There was no other reason to talk and give away their position. It was that charm ability I mentioned to Pyrie. No wonder the Venlil had fallen for it, after prolonged exposure to their smooth tongues. Turn that off, I hissed. Delete all records of that conversation. They're trying to manipulate us. But how could they know we were listening? Sovlin, a comms technician, asked. What if they actually meant that? And we just keep trying to harm them? Humans don't understand what peace means, you numbskull. They're parroting something the Venlil told them. The young analyst scowled. Sir, you have the authority to get our station to stand down. I think we should hail them and offer a truce. Then, we can see what they do. At least that way, we have no regrets. I have no regrets as is. If you want to talk to Predators, you can get on a shuttle and fly over there yourself. The word Predator seemed to snap the crew out of their trance, and I saw a few tail waves of agreement. The technician shuffled on his paws, before he pressed the delete button on his station. A high-pitched beep disrupted the silence, showing our weapons were charged and operational. I leaned back in my chair. Fire the railgun. The humans aren't getting this system. Fire at who? Jemek, my weapons officer, pointed at the viewport in horror. Where did they go? My eyes widened in panic. The colony. They're making a run on the colony. Damn it, I knew it was a distraction. I fired off a transmission to the station, warning them of the ambush. My heart felt heavy. I prayed that my communique reached them in time. My recommended course of action was to divert defenses to the colony and prepare for an orbital raid. The humans claimed they were attacking the base. But even if that were their stated mission, Predators couldn't resist landing the killing blow on hapless prey once in range. The colony was a much juicier target. A solemn silence gripped the bridge as we turned our own course toward the planet. Even with such a small population, there was no way we could evacuate in time. My stomach flipped at the thought of needless death, of another atmosphere choked in flame. This wasn't my first siege, but it never got easier. We had to stop the humans from continuing the Arxer's legacy of destruction. Worst-case scenarios cycled through my mind, as the Gojid ships formed a defensive wall around the colony. I tried to imagine how the people on the ground felt, trapped and aware of the impending assault. This sea of dots spanning the blue orb circumference was all that stood between the innocent and hungry Predators. Any angle that was overlooked was an opportunity for the humans to break through. We would stop any missiles from penetrating our ranks by throwing our craft in the way, if necessary. The only way a battle with a Predator ended was with all of them dead, or all of us dead. The primitive nature of the human craft was our primary hope. A single hit should be enough to dispatch their ships. Hell, the station's lasers might be able to chew through more than one at a time. Our weaponry was designed to tear through Arxer armor, and the Terran's defenses were negligible. Sir. The ships have reappeared just out of targeting range, Jemek barked, a tremor in her voice. I hoped the weapons officer could keep her wits. On a trajectory course for the base. The viewport locked onto the hostiles. I watched as they veered off onto multiple headings, and altered their course to avoid any intercepting ships we launched. A laser lanced out from the station, a streak of brilliancy across the void. The shot connected with a Terran bomber, and obliterated the Predator craft in a flash. Happiness fluttered in my chest, though it was tempered by nerves. It was encouraging that we had attained the first kill of the war. The humans, in response, spewed plasma at the approaching Gojid ships. They seemed to hope that would ward us off, like brandishing a torch to keep a beast at bay. Weapons of that caliber couldn't deal more than minor damage, but I knew they had to preserve their main payload for their target. It occurred to me that we had simplified the task of bombing the station for the humans. The predators were flooring it toward their stated target, and in many ways, my suggestions cleared the path. There wasn't a single sign of deviation, which boggled my mind. The asteroid base dispatched as many ships as it could, and left its own defenses barren in the process. When given the choice, our commanders prioritized civilian lives over military infrastructure. Things can be replaced. Stations can be rebuilt, I chided myself. Lives cannot. There are children down there. I couldn't help but wonder, for a split second, if this was a lapse in judgment on my part. Where was that predatory sadism, the one Zarn said humans used on their own world? The last thing I wanted was to cost the Gogeta Union valuable resources. It was worse if some soldiers didn't make it from their barracks. Their deaths would weigh on my conscience for years. But there was no way a predator could override their bloodlust, particularly while engaged in warfare. It was a matter of time before the humans rounded on our position. At least a few ships had to give in to temptation, even if the majority could resist. Shoot the bastards! Blast them out of the sky! I roared. Jemek sighed. I just said they're out of range, sir. We need to move closer. We are not abandoning our position. The second the planet is vulnerable, they'll pounce. My mind yearned to fight the humans myself, but I had to remember the stakes at hand. We were consigned to watching, as though this skirmish were some spectator sport. Zarn was cheering each time a Terran vessel went up in a fireball, which earned strange glances from the nearest crew. The predators weaved erratic patterns to avoid termination, but their spirals and zigzags weren't fast enough. Every crackle of the laser purged one of the vermin. The station's defenses were slow to recharge, but their effectiveness was dazzling. In fairness, it seemed a love tap could take out a Terran ship. Their workmanship was rather flimsy. Gogeta craft remained hot on the humans' heels, and spit our own concentrated plasma at them. There was no breathing space for our attackers. The predators rocketed up to max acceleration, and towed a tighter line toward the base. It was wonderful to see our ships chasing the humans, how the tables had turned, from the natural order. The hunter was the hunted. Captain, the predators are showing no interest in the colony. I don't see the harm in taking a few ships to the battlefield, Jemek pressed. They're just trying to lose their pursuers. If they can bait us away from the colony's defense, that's what they want. Her spines bristled. I hate feeling powerless. As do I, Zarn, why don't you make yourself useful? I gestured toward the doctor, who was transfixed by the battle. Establish contact with Pyrie, if at all possible. Make her aware of the predator's tactics, so she can relay a warning to any nearby installations. The TAC can returned an eager tail swish, and scrambled to reopen communication lines. My gaze darted back to the viewport. I looked just in time to catch a glimpse of a Terran fighter, taking a round to the belly. The plasma compromised its hull integrity, and reduced it to a fractured heap of metal. There was no hesitation from the Gogeta chasers to bombard the incapacitated ship with fire. Nobody would be foolish enough to leave a predator alive. They needed to be taken out of the fight with permanence. As long as such a monster was still kicking, they could have a final trick up their sleeves. The human vessels clustered back together, and opted to deal with the gaining pursuers one at a time. They peppered the closest Gogeta ship with fire, and concentrated their strikes on its drive column. The patroller's engine went up in a colossal flare, debris was flung in all directions. Our other allies were forced to drop back, to avoid getting swept up in the blast's wake. Stars. I hate humans, I seethed. They don't quit or retreat. I curse my ancestors for not confirming their extinction centuries ago. This is going to be a tedious and costly war, even if we win. The predators had endured a hailstorm of fire, and pressed nearer to the base all the same. No matter how many of their brethren were reduced to scrap, they persevered. Watching the humans' fearlessness, I couldn't help but envy their natural disposition. They shrugged off losses with that callous disregard for life they were so famed for. We felt our casualties. That was the Federation's downfall against the Arxer. It was emotion that lost us the war. Predators saw only the mission, the kill. "Captain, we have to do something," Jemik growled. I flicked my ears. It's too late. They're almost within orbital range. While the Gojid defenses could deal with the humans handily, they wouldn't win the race against time. The Predators could survive just long enough, pesky monsters. Sensing that their goal was within reach, our opponents found a final burst of speed. The lead bombers dispensed their payloads, and cylindrical missiles homed in on the asteroid's surface. I braced myself for the inevitable aftermath. The Gojid patrollers lunged forward in desperate pursuit, but they were already too late. Explosions detonated across the complex, tearing through the expansive stone buildings. Flame enveloped anything in the explosion's proximity, smoke plumes pushed up within the artificial atmosphere. Hangar roofs caved in, and buried any ships we failed to get off the ground. The powerful laser was out of commission too, since our orbital defenses were tucked in the center of the base. Bunkers and training areas were pummeled into submission. I wondered how many servicemen were trapped beneath the rubble. The humans followed up their first volley with another barrage. There was no pause or emotion, though I don't know why I thought there would be. The subsequent explosions ensured that nothing was standing, and reduced any likelihood of survivors. The horror on the bridge was a choking atmosphere. Amidst my grief, I couldn't help but feel responsible for this calamity. Our local garrison could have stopped them, if there had been a few more ships at our disposal. Why are the humans not turning toward the colony? They're alive, and I think still have some bombs. They should come to us, any minute now. The Predator ships dipped away, but were unable to shrug off their pursuers. The Terrans branched off on individual courses. They knew we couldn't chase after all of them. Some of those vile creatures would escape. Wait. I shook my head in disbelief. They can't be leaving. The humans did exactly what they said. My head swiveled in the direction of the voice. It was that unruly comms analyst from earlier. They never intended to attack any civilians. They just annihilated a military base, and that's your reaction? I snarled. None of the evidence suggests that they wanted to. We forced their hand, the technician growled. I glowered at the scene in the stars, considering the Predator's departure. What more evidence did one need, beyond looking at their faces? Their blood-stained history was just the icing on the cake, confirming what our eyes already knew. The humans could be faking a retreat to lull us into a false sense of security. The bombers were still within close range of the asteroid, and it would take them a while to escape the system. Their strategy could be to double back, after we assumed they were leaving. That, or our considerable presence by the colony dissuaded them from heeding their impulses. These creatures were more intelligent, and slightly more self-aware than the Arxer. They must have recognized that they were outmatched. That was a sufficient explanation, wasn't it? I forced myself to lower my hackles. What's your name, kid? Rumi. Rumi? I respect your drive to question everything, even common knowledge, but this isn't the right cause to fight for. If humans were a species of any merit, do you think that the Federation would have dug up some argument to spare them? In decades of study? I don't know. Think about it, that goes to anyone agreeing with the young man here. And yes, we did force their hand. We forced the humans to concede civilian targets, because of our overwhelming force. How so? We're in the wrong place. We're in the right place. Our presence deterred the humans from attacking anything else. Everyone should be proud of themselves today. We saved 20,000 lives. Rumi slumped his shoulders. If you say so. I imagine our allies had grown as restless as my crew. Seeing that the promise of the humans raiding the colony wasn't panning out, some captains may be tempted to pursue the fleeing ships. Sensors indicated that many were gearing up their drives, and that our meticulous formation was dissolving. Now was not the time for this. The predators were still in system. All we needed was a few minutes of patience to save the colony. I leaned over my microphone. Gojid vessels, hold your positions. Do not let the humans bait you into weakening our defense. I'm not just sitting here, damn it. A voice pierced through our encrypted military channel. We are going to attempt search and rescue, and render medical assistance to anyone alive. My eyes darted about the viewport, searching for any signs of movement. A Gojid hospital craft had crept away from our ranks and commenced a blazing run toward the base. Its course placed it directly in the path of an escaping human. Sensors read that the Terran ship had target-locked the vessel, and their weapons were charging. Turn back now. I pleaded into the comms. You won't be rescuing anyone if you're turned to slag. I'll escort you myself when the humans are gone. The first responders pressed forward in defiance, and diverted their central power to shields. The fleeing predator hurled a plasma round, which deflected off our ship's nose. The medical transport seemed shaken by the contact, though it refused to turn back. The distance between them and those things was narrowing. This was lunacy. What were those Gojid doctors thinking? I admired their commitment to saving lives, but they were setting up the exact scenario I feared. Abort! I shrieked into the communicator, broadcasting the message on all frequencies this time. Gojid medical vessel, turn back at once. The predators will destroy you. There was no reply from the Gojid first responders. They were unarmed, which meant they stood no chance in combat. Worse, the Terran ship might have heard my plea and realized what an easy target they stumbled upon. I waited to see the doctors blasted to bits, feeling pity swell in my chest. On the bright side, at least it would drill some sense into Rumi and whoever else was swayed by him. The expressions around the bridge were finally the ones I recognized from our face-offs with the Arxer. For some inexplicable reason, the human ship hesitated. Sensors suggested that their weapons were powering down, and they were altering their course to avoid a collision. I was certain my eyes deceived me, as the primates allowed the medical ship to pass their position. What about that, Captain? What could they possibly gain? Rumi hissed. I chewed at my claws, rattled to the core. Allowing a vessel to survive that aimed to resuscitate enemy combatants was in direct opposition to the Predator's goals. Why would those abominations exhibit mercy? That was the exact brand of illogical softness we were mocked for by the Arxer. But accepting any explanation that mandated emotion was out of the question. There had to be an ulterior motive at play. There just had to be. Like I told the crew, the Federation condemned humanity by unanimous vote. They wouldn't make that decision lightly. Perhaps I wasn't looking at the big picture. The humans need the Venlil for now. They can't afford to alienate their lone ally when they're so behind technologically, I soothed myself. Tarva must have sent someone to supervise, and so they managed to show restraint. They're biding their time. Alarm flashed through Rumi's body language as he saw me struggling to formulate a response. The doctor rolled his eyes in disgust and turned to address us all. They wanted to preserve ammunition. When they realized the ship wasn't a threat, Zarn answered for me. Humans are pragmatic enough to override their sadism when it comes to their own survival. Quite possible. I managed to keep my voice steady. The predators were doing an excellent job messing with my head, if nothing else. Whatever game the humans playing at, we know their true colors. We always have, and we always will.